This video is going to show the process that we are using in my high school ceramics room of making patterns for the shoe project that we're going to be starting. The first thing that I usually tell kids is just take a picture or two of your shoe before we start. If you want to leave your shoelaces in, you have to be really careful not to cut through the shoelaces. So I'm actually just going to tuck them down in here in between the tongue and the where the shoelaces go in the holes. And I'm just going to tape this. I want to be a little bit secure. I want to err on the side of caution so I don't end up by cutting the shoelaces off. Now, for something like this, I only want to leave this masking tape for like 2 or 3 days at the most before I get it off. If you leave it on there for weeks, it could kind of get all gummy. Once the shoelaces are taped down, I insert the shoe into the protective shoe cover. When the glue doesn't cover, I'm going to use a paper towel to make sure that when I put the tape on, I'm not sticking it to the shoe, but yet I'm sticking it to the outer stuff. Also, I wanted to mention, if you happen to have something tall like this boot, and of course the blue cover won't cover it, you can wrap plastic around it. I have plastic or paper towels, but anything to help cover it before you put the tape on. Now, just a reminder, the first thing that I want to pay attention to is I want to actually outline the opening of the shoe, okay? So see, the opening of the shoe is going to be right here. So I'm not taping over that blue part. That part is going to be scrapped and it will be cut off later. So here, now I have to go up to the paper towel. All right, now the key thing is I may have paper towel that's right here, but I'm not wrapping the tape over it. The tape is delineating the opening of the shoe. Okay, once I do that, then I can go ahead and start to put the tape on it throughout the whole thing. And once I get that outline done, then I'm just going to continue to cover the entire thing. I do wrap it rather snugly with the tape because I want it to fit the form of the shoe, and I don't want it to be loose or anything. I only need to have one layer of tape on, although I do overlap it ever so slightly to make sure that it doesn't have holes. All right, now I have everything on my shoe taped. Again, I have gone right up to the opening of the shoe, but not over it. Okay, so I went up to the opening over here as well. This is going to be scrapped later. Now, in addition to drawing panels like this, where I could draw the panels just the way they were, there's another slightly easier way. So I want to show you the easier way to define a shoe. Now, the first thing that I am going to do is I am going to outline the bottom edge, okay? Because the bottom edge, that's going to be the pattern for the sole. Okay, so you can see I have the bottom edge outlined. Now I need to think about how thick is that rubber sole. And on this one, it's not very thick. It's not as thick as like some of the athletic gym shoes, but that rubber sole is probably between 1/4 of an inch and a half an inch thick. Okay. All right. Now, this little piece, that's going to be waste. Like I don't need to make a pattern of that because when I actually roll out the thickness of the sole, that's going to be how thick it is, right? So now, instead of delineating it exactly the way that my patterns are, I want to show you a slightly easier way. So this is especially nice if you have a shoe that's, say, like one of those woven, all the fabric has no panels on it. So this can kind of help. So I'm going to think about where's like the bottom of the shoelaces, and I'll just kind of make a line here. Now, I know that this shoe does not have a panel that looks like this, but when I put it together, I can blend it and I can make it look just the way I need it. So there is my toe section. And then if I'm really thoughtful about this, I can make this in like 3, 4, 5 pieces. So here I'm going to come up and I'm going to make side panels, and this is a tongue. Now the tongue is not that skinny, I know that, but when I go to actually make the clay tongue, I'll expand it and make it wider. And then here, I could do this one of two ways. I could like make the back a panel, or I could just make it a panel like this with like a seam in the back. Okay, so what I have is I have 1 panel, 2, 3, the tongue is 4, and then the bottom is 5. Now I'm going to also write down on this, I'm going to say this is the inside, and then I'm going to write on this one, this is the outside. Okay, and I'm going to say left sole, right? So that will help me remember it's the left foot when I do this, because otherwise you might flip it around. Okay, so this is an easy peasy way to break it up into simple panels. It's a little easier than trying to divide it according to the panels the way that the shoe was. But you can still do it that way if you want. But this is an easy way. Okay, now as I start to cut this, remember that I was using the tape as my guide for the outline up here. So I'm going to just remove that paper towel because that part is trash. I'm going to remove this blue part. The plastic that hangs over the heel is not important because that's not part of the pattern. Okay, all right. So now my outline looks a little bit clearer to understand. Now I'm going to cut along the lines, and you could start on whichever one you're most comfortable with. I'm going to start right here. And obviously, I want to be careful not to damage the shoe. So as I do this, remember that that little thickness right there, that part is actually trash, so I can cut through that little bit right there. Okay. So once you get to a certain point, you can probably slip the shoe out without too much effort. Might not be to that point yet. Okay, let's see if it comes out now. There we go. So the shoe comes out. Now I can just cut it apart. This helps to protect. Remember how I taped those down? If you wanted to cut in there, just be careful with the tape. You know, you don't want to cut your shoelaces off. But that's one reason that I kind of like to slide it out when at all possible. Okay, so here's my tongue. I'm going to write, I'm going to say tongue top. so I know, not that it matters a whole lot, but I just wanted to have that clear. And then lastly, on the sole, this is where I have that extra, that like 1/4 inch kind of thickness of the sole. I'm just going to trim that away. So that little strip is going to be trash. If you have a shoe with a much thicker sole, this part would be thicker. All right, so now I have my the two sides, the sole, the tongue, and then the toe. Now, the hardest part about this is the toe, because you can see the toe is curved. So when I go to flatten this, I have to I'm going to increase a little bit of volume there to kind of mimic knowing that I have a little bit more volume with that. All right, so now that we have everything cut out, now I'm ready to trace it onto paper. So for my kids, I'm telling them if they can fit their pieces all, if they can fit it on one of the average size pieces of copy paper, please do. If you need a larger, I do have some legal size paper that you can use, especially if you have like a really large sole, like, a guy's shoe that might be super big or something. You can use the legal paper. But so what we are doing is we're going to trace them on here, and I'll just write down my comments so I know what they are. Okay, and we're going to trace them on here, and then we're going to figure out how big we want the shoe to eventually be, because remember, we can shrink or enlarge the shoe as necessary. Now, in the case of my students, we want to try to shrink our shoes so it can fit within our little damp box. So I'm going to write inside. Oops. Okay, and then I've got a couple more. Okay, now this is the piece where it gets a little tricky, because see how, as I squish it, it kind of folds up on itself, so it's not really laying flat. So this is where I'm just going to improvise, and when I do the rounded toe part, I'm going to add on a little bit more volume. So I just swing it out a little bit bigger like that, okay? And one nice thing about writing on the tops of them is you know which one is the top and which is the bottom then. And then lastly, on the tongue. So remember how the tongue looks super narrow, but if we look at the actual tongue on the shoe, here, let me take this stuff off. Okay, if we look at the actual tongue on the shoe, you can see it's way, way, way wider, right? So I am going to expand this out, maybe not quite as large as the actual tongue, but I'll go ahead and expand this out. And I'll even lengthen it a little bit so I can, when I attach it from the inside. And the wide end on that one would be, the opening of the shoe there. Okay, now let's talk about percentage. Kids, I will have a chart available to you to look at, or you can easily take your calculator and figure out what your percentage is. I will link that in the video description if anybody wants it. So let's hypothetically say if I look at this and the length of my sole is 28 centimeters. Now, I want it to fit within my box. So I'm telling my kids somewhere between 18 and 24 centimeters is our target size. So let's say if I took this and I wanted 75% of it, that way when I put it in the copy machine, I'll put in a 75%. So it will reduce it to 75% of the original size. And if I put in my calculator like 28 times 0.75, 75%, then I'll see that it ends up as 21 centimeters long, which is fine. So if I like that size, I'm going to write 75% and then write your name on your paper. And then I'm going to do it on both. Okay, and then kids, I'm going to have you paper clip your papers together. Okay, then you're going to give me these, and then I will take them to the copy machine and I will shrink or enlarge them as necessary. So when we go to do it the following day, everyone will have their patterns the correct size. And just to reiterate, the little white edge on the bottom, that is a rubber edge that's put around the outside. We'll be adding that on with clay to make it look like the rubber edge at the end. So that's actually not part of the sole thickness. That's added later.